we are live.
Good morning,
Yeah,
everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Republic Hangout. I am Makisha. It is daylight savings time ended, or however that nonsense works over here. So we've got all kinds of time zones going crazy. We'll see who ends up showing up an hour at the wrong time, or who has, let's see, what would it be? Who has shown up an hour at the wrong time? Anyway, welcome. This week we're going to talk about politics. Atheism and politics, religion and politics, how do they influence each other, and how should atheists be involved? What do we need to do? What should we do? What should we not do? I'm sure everybody will have some thoughts. It's an election time. Canada just ended our federal election, and America's coming up, and I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. I'm not that on top of things, but I'm sure we'll have some people who know what's going on. So first I want to start out by asking if anybody dressed up for Halloween. That was unimpressive. All right, well, I didn't either. I was myself. Casper, what did you do for Halloween?
I actually have a sort of a skull-looking mask that I was wearing with my hoodie, so I was just wearing a mask, looking scary when the kids came by. I sat out at our patio table on the front porch with a bucket of candy, and I just sat there totally still, so when the kids came up, they would ring the doorbell and everything, and then I would jump up and scare them. So
Nice. I was not allowed to celebrate Halloween when I was growing up, and then when I got old enough to do my own, because, you know, it's the devil's holiday or whatever, when I got old enough to do my own thing, I just wasn't really into costumes, and I think I just never have gotten into it too much. Last year our whole family did Alice in Wonderland, so I was the Queen of Hearts, and that was fun. And but other than that, I don't do much. I went to a live performance of the Welcome to Night Vale podcast last night, and Welcome to Night Vale is a great podcast, by the way. It's a fictional drama, kind of wacky. It's very difficult to describe, but you should look it up. You might like it. But anyway, that was going on last night. There were lots of great costumes of mostly college students. It was at the UBC campus, so there was. And then I got to do a long bus ride home with a bus full of drunk Halloween frat boys. Oh, that was good times. All right, if we don't have any more Halloween stories, then let's get started into politics. I guess Egypt had an election too. I know nothing about that. I'm sure Armin will. But I was told that happened as well. So I don't remember the question that we posed to the community. So Armin, why don't you start just by asking that question, and maybe you can lead off with some of your thoughts.
Well, the question a lot of people ask on the page the Atheist Republic page and other platforms, our private group and our Facebook forum is atheist activism becoming too political. A lot of people mention that atheism has nothing to do with politics. Atheism is just a lack of belief in God. Why are we getting involved? Why are we becoming too much like religion? Why are we trying to lobby the government to try to get our way, to get, become a special interest group, looking after atheist rights, looking after keeping religion and government separate. Some people have even among atheist activists that are some people think that you shouldn't even be an atheist activist, because how could you actively not believe in something? Other people that are even among atheist activists, some people suggest that the best strategy to reach out to people is a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach, meaning that instead of trying to go to the government and trying to lobby them to get your way, it's better just to educate people and give them the best information and let them vote in the right way, and that's how you get your political way, not by going to the government directly and trying to force them to consider your view. But again, we have some atheist activists that are political, and their point of view is that um, you're not going to get things done like that. First of all, when you say atheism is a lack of belief in God, that doesn't mean that atheist activists can do nothing other than lack belief in God. They could try to go out there and fight for the rights of atheists. They say that religion has a lot of influence in politics, and somebody needs to go there and counter that, and so that's why atheism does get atheist activists do need to get involved in politics. A lot of people, when they also just among even simple discussions, whenever we post a political question, one of the most common questions is like, "Oh, I thought this was an atheist page. Why are you asking a political question?" So those are general, both on the activist side and also on the discussion side. That's something that a lot of people are very touchy about. This is actually something that people get very passionate about, how much they hate or how much they accept.
I think what that reaction alone is very telling. The fact that atheists believe or automatically jump to thinking that politics is a religious discussion or in somehow linked with religion. I think that alone is really telling. Casper, what do you think?
Okay, so I think the best example we have, and just right here in the U.S. right now, if you follow U.S. politics at all, if you're a U.S. citizen, you should follow U.S. politics. And if you're not, it's still kind of important to follow U.S. politics because the things that we do here tend to affect the entire world. And when we get jackasses voted in as POTUS, it can be very, very bad for the rest of the world. So one of the things we need to look at is a recent quote by Ben Carson, and this. Let's remember, this man is a neurosurgeon. He has a PhD in neurosurgery. Okay, so he should be an enlightened and intelligent person, given what we tend to think of by collegiately educated people with high degrees like PhDs. But Ben Carson recently said, and I quote, "If Noah can build an ark, then I can be president." Well, here's where we need atheist activists, because we need people to stand up and say, Noah and his ark are both fiction, and if you believe that, you're a dumbass, and you don't deserve to be president. You can't be president because you can't even figure out the difference between reality and fiction. So we need people, especially atheist activists, to jump in there and say, look, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous that a person can hold the highest office in this country and make laws and determinations that affect every citizen of this country when he can't even distinguish between reality and fiction. Like, that is insane. Why would we put someone like that in office? And why do we keep doing it? And we do over here. We do it over and over again. So I think it becomes important when you understand what you're up against. And that's what a lot of people don't get. A lot of people don't understand that we're up against this sort of religious dogma and people that think that their religion should rule the day when it comes to politics. So we need atheist activists in there to combat that, to battle that, and to say, no, this is a secular country. And the only way that government actually works is secularly, because that's the only way we have equality and fairness for all people. So whether you're religious or not should not affect whether or not you can be president, but at the same time, you have to openly admit that you are capable of separating your religion from what is best for all of the citizenry.
Thanks, Casper. Yeah, and since in America, whether or not you're religious actually does affect your electability, makes it even more important to at least speak to those issues, or at least speak to the issues of the politics wherever you happen to be living. Marita, Just don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi guys, regards from Croatia. We have elections this month, parliamentary, and we have a lot of problems with the state and with right wing of our political scene, because I don't know how you familiar with Croatian politics and our situation, but here is very difficult, especially it's very special because we are on Balkan. Maybe Dejan Savic will explain that better to you, because he's a little bit older than me. I'm still young, and atheists are here stigmatized. The people think that we are evil, communist evil, because we are former Yugoslavia Republic, and they think we want to bring Satanism into country, and they don't like us at all. We have several groups on Facebook, several associations, even atheists and secularists. I can write you that, yeah, Philip, yeah, the same stupid accusations. People don't know us very well, and people are in a box. They don't want to hear the other people's opinions, what they think, what they want to learn, what they want to do. And we have here a few events that is from our original group, Atheists and Agnostics of Croatia, Coffee with Non-Believers. And we have a protest that is for turn off the Vatican contractions. You know all what Vatican contractions are, and people don't like that. People attack us because they want the pure Christianity in our country. I don't know really why. The former communists, the people from former communist party, are now the great religious people, the great Catholics, and they think that we don't have a place in politics because we want communism back. That's not true at all. Definitely. They put in the same atheism and communism and Russia and other bullshits. And they say we are like terrorists because we want learn people what atheism really is, and we must find a place in a politics. Definitely, the left political wing is so frightened because, especially now, especially this year, because of these fucking elections, because they want more votes, and they are ass kisser to religious people. I don't know how can I fix that, because I'm just one person, and we need think more about states who have the same or similar problems like Croatia, because Croatia definitely need help with that. The church is in every sequence of our life, in a politics, in a private life, in schools, especially in the schools, in the kindergartens, everywhere is a church. We are secular state, just on the paper, but I don't see secularity in the practice. Why? Why is that? Am I so stupid that I cannot understand politics or what? That's all.
Thanks, Marita. You brought up a lot of really good points, and I think some important questions and interesting topics that we can talk about. One of which is when you have a religious power in the government, in the political system, I think the question becomes very different. I feel like when we ask the question, should atheists be involved in politics, it's almost coming from a really different, from a perspective of people who have any power or any say in that in the first place. And so I really appreciate when we have these other points of view, because it's a very sort of North American, European kind of question to ask. You know, the questions come from an already existing position of power that I think is interesting to acknowledge. And so I appreciate that point of view a lot. Casper wanted to speak to some of what you were going to say, and I'd also like to hear some of maybe Philippe can talk a little bit about what's going on in France, and I'm sure Arif will have some chances to chime in once he has a chance to listen a little bit. So go ahead, Casper.
So yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Marita said there, and one of the big problems that you run into is that when you say the word secularism, people automatically want to equate that with communism and socialism, and they want to automatically say that this is part of this evil conspiracy. They throw around New World Order fucking conspiracy theories and all sorts of crazy shit. But the reality is secularism just means a pluralistic governing style which gives equality to all people. And it's not a bad thing. That's why secularism works in government, because it offers pluralism. Everyone is treated equally. It doesn't matter if you are religious or not. It matters that you're able to have equality and be treated equally with all other people. So whether you're religious or you're an atheist, you get treated the same in the courts, in your daily social life. Everyone is treated equally, and that's what secularism offers. And we need to move away from this sort of, and speak on this so that we can move away from this sort of equivocation that secularism is somehow ingrained in communism and socialism, because it isn't. I myself am a socialist, but that doesn't mean that I think that's exactly where we should be as a nation. And my personal views on our economic stance towards a more socialistic government does not translate out into I want us to be communist. I just want equality, and the only way to have equality is through secularism. So that equivocation is something that we have to address, and again, that's why we need atheist activists involved in these movements and politics.
And I do think there's an important distinction between atheism and secularism in this particular context, in the sense that when an atheist is talking about politics, especially in any sort of like official or formal capacity, I think the emphasis needs to be on secularism, not anti-theism. And I think maybe that tends to be where we get into some problems in the conversation, is a lot of atheist activists are anti-theists, which tends to come across very poorly in political conversation. Because I'm not sure anti-theism is necessarily where we want to go politically as much as secularism, perhaps. And so maybe that distinction is something we can suss out and talk a little bit about as well. Arif, go ahead. not sure if Arif could hear me or if there's a delay. There we go.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm actually at work today, so I was running around. I obviously have joined slightly late, so I haven't been able to catch everyone else's point of view. But generally, the way I see these days, religion and politics have become more and more together, I should say. It's definitely a trend against what, after the French Revolution, there has been a separation, but it's now coming to.
I just lost Arif. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear him.
He's muted for me.
Okay, Arif, I just lost your sound. It's not showing to me that you're muted, but maybe check on that real quick. I'm going to give it a try again. No, I'm not getting any volume from you. So just for now, I'm going to move on to Philippe, and then we'll try to come back to Arif. Philippe, could you give us a little bit of maybe background or whatever you feel is important to, or what's on your mind about France right now regarding politics?
Okay, hello all. Hope you hear me. Okay, so France. Well, that's a tough subject because on the national level you have two big streams that are coming across. Okay, so traditionally it's rude for a political person to state what are his beliefs, religious beliefs, because we are a very secular state, and the separation of church and state law of 1901 being a very, very tough battle. There have been dead people, not only bruises. So it comes from back very largely, and it's quite complicated because what we have seen in the last 30 years is a rising of the political influence of the religious lobby on two levels. For example, you have the CRIF, C-R-I-F, with the committee that represents the Jews, and well, it's very bad noted for a political person not to go to the annual dinner. It's like stating, I'm not for Israel, basically, or I may understand some anti-Semitic points of view, even if it's not the case, but it's interpreted like this. On a different level, for example, in some little cities, you have mayors who have bought social peace by having acquaintances with Islamic guys and Islamic groups and saying, okay, I give you this room and you can do whatever you want, to teach whatever you want to kids during Sundays or after class things, but vote for me and try to get rid of the thugs and to avoid the 1st January traditional riots and things like that. So you have this influence, and on the other hand, you have this battle against the veil in class. So it's a very confused situation where people now are afraid to state that they think that political Islam is a problem, like political Catholicism, and that there is some sort sometimes of two ways of treating people, and that's true because when you have far-right Catholic things, riots happening and manifestation, for example, what we've seen against the mariage pour tous, waiting for all, that was for homosexual couples. When you've seen like 100,000 people gathering over there and being violent and etc., there were no arrests. Nothing happened because the politics were too afraid to, oh, we don't want to have problems with that sort of people who are capable of so have so much power of gathering and revendication. So on the other hand, the counter manifestation that happened before were much more crowded and much more quiet, but then there less media, less rumble, so it was less interesting. So you have the impression that the few bothering people are much more noisy than the quiet and calm ones. As usual, it's the extreme that you hear and not the middle one. But something that starts to be heard in the French society is that moderate Muslims should be the first one to work against the extremists. First, because they are the first victims of what they say and what they do everywhere in the world, and because it starts to push some people to vote to the extreme right, who says all the problems we have comes from Islam. And so we are going to get rid of all the Arabs, making the equivalency between being Muslim and being an Arab, and mostly from Algeria in our case. So it starts to be a problem, but there is so movements and NGOs and non-profits organization that starts to raise the flag and say, okay, now we have to make decisions and stand for what we believe in. And there is this little piece of text. It could be a meme. I will make the translation and send it to you. It's a quote from the 1901 law of separation and states and church, saying that everyone who is pushing to riots or to trouble the public and etc. maybe have a fine and arrested and etc. So it works for everyone, because at the time Islam was absolutely not the target.
I think that's such an interesting, and I have a question for you, Philippe. And do you feel like that extreme stance and that particular kind of social mores that has developed out of that, as far as not it basically being inconceivable to share your religion if you're in politics, or to talk about your religion if you're a political figure, do you think that has worked against the original goal of having such a strictly secular government? Do you think it's caused some more problems than it's actually resolved? Or do you think it was sort of a necessary move at the time that now is sort of balancing itself? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure to quite understand your question, but what I would say is that if you see at the historical way of action for French politics, and mostly in the 19th and 20th century, it's very rude to talk about your religion and your money. It's two sacred cows in France. You don't talk about what you earn and what you do and etc. because it's very impolite it's rude to be like bragging about how much you earn and etc. because we are a society where when you do, for example, you had this conscription. So I did my military service like everyone. I was one of the last generation. But in the military, you could be with a high-class guy and a mine worker in the same group. You know, so it's very impolite to brag about what you have, because it's a possible subject of dissension in the nation. We're supposed to be equal in rights and etc., and not being like, because I'm rich, I will have a better lawyer than you, because the system in France, for example, for justice is like you have the same lawyer for everyone. Okay, so now you can buy a better lawyer, etc., but the basic, if you don't want to pay, etc., you will have a lawyer that is given to you if you have a problem, and it could be a very great guy that has the obligation to do a certain time of hours of this obligation, or just a youngster, for example. So if you don't have any money, you can have a great lawyer to defend you in any case. So that's an example. But to answer your question, it's okay. Now we have some people, and there always have been on the far right, and very religious Catholic people who were bragging about what the Bible says and whatever to talk about the laws and etc. The deputies, for example, and we have much examples later days of some of them who are just like against the marriage for gays because it's in the Bible, it's an abomination, blah blah blah. So we have the same ones. But on the other hand, there is very few socialist guys who say, I'm an atheist, and there's a, because you don't even have to state it. Because if you're a social guy and you're on the left, well, it's almost implied that you are no master, no God. Because we all come from there. It's been a rough battle, and we are starting to losing it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Philippe, for explaining that a little further. Todd, go ahead.
You brought up a good point about secularism versus anti-theism, and I think that may be one of the sources of some of the problems that we have. Most of the conversation that I hear and that I read within the atheist community is indicative of that same sort of black and white either or thinking that plagues religious communities. We should do this. No, we should do this. Why is it either or? I think one of the things that one of the good questions that the article that was linked posed was, atheist activists. What are we trying to accomplish? What are we being activists for? What are we advocating? And then from that end, okay, what's our end? What should our goals be? And whenever we talk about secularism versus anti-theism, I think there are a lot of us who are anti-theists and who would espouse a secular view, but we don't know when to switch between one and the other, and those do get melded together, because it's possible to have political viewpoints that are consistent with religious viewpoints but aren't motivated by religious views. The problem that you have there is people from the populace will stand up and say, "Ha, see, they're doing things because that is consistent with this religious view." So there are enough religions out there, and as a matter of fact, even in America, you can take the Bible and you can say, well, of course it's going to be consistent with some sort of view of Christianity. There's nothing you can say, really. There is just literally nothing you can say that you can't justify somehow with some verse of Scripture, and there's going to be some group out there that espouses that view. So you're going to get into that, and you're going to have people saying how that's a religious view. Well, not necessarily. It may be consistent with the religious view. That position may be consistent with one, but it may not be religiously motivated. And I think whenever we hear that, we bristle because we think, oh well, this is they're acting in the interest of religion. They're trying to impose religious ideologies and religious views on everyone else, and not necessarily, really, truly, not necessarily. And I think it comes back to one of the things that we had talked about earlier on an earlier hangout is, can atheists work with others toward mutually beneficial social goals? Can you work with people with whom you disagree? There's going to come at some point that, sure, you disagree on maybe what reality is. You may disagree on the age of the Earth, the age of the universe. You may disagree on how everything's going to end, whether it's going to end in heat death versus some sort of cataclysmic thing with somebody riding in on a horse strangely and killing everyone who disagrees with them because that's a good solution somehow. We can disagree on those kinds of things, but that doesn't mean that we can't work together in the here and now. That doesn't mean that the people that are here, I don't think any of us want the governments in our bedrooms. I don't think we want them in our pockets any more than they absolutely have to be, and they're in there a lot more than they really need to be perfectly honest, at least in my view. I think, and maybe this is naive on my part, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the movie Pacific Rim, but there are giant robots designed to fight these giant monsters. It's really cool. The little kid in me is fascinated by it, and they're piloted by two people. and the system that they have melds their minds together and to operate as a single unit, to operate this big, huge robotic thing with a single goal and with a single purpose all the time. And I think people view governments that way. People view governments as basically an extension of a human, that they're this big robot that does things, and the people that are driving are the ones that are really getting things done. And I don't think that I don't think much to Mitt Romney's chagrin, I don't think corporations are people. Neither do I think governments are people. They don't operate with the same. They're not human beings. The positions of power are occupied by humans, but they're not a human entity themselves. So can a government have beliefs? Can a government have an ideology? Can a government have a worldview? I think that's whenever we get into those kind of discussions, we tend to anthropomorphize these nebulous ideas. I mean, hell, we've been fighting wars on concepts for 30 fucking years here. Maybe that's a uniquely American thing, but I think we misunderstand. A lot of us and a lot of the populace, I think, misunderstand what government is. They just want somebody who shares their ideology and shares their views to be in control, so that they can feel like they're in control. Forgetting all the time that without a populace to rule, there would be no ruling class. So I think, and to close, I think it comes down to, it doesn't have to be either or. I think we can activate or advocate lobbying, and I think we can advocate voter education. And I don't think really any of us here would say that there's anything wrong with doing a two-pronged approach. Although I think if you were to ask us personally, we'd say we'd prefer one over the other, and that's perfectly natural. But I think it's a joint approach of reducing supply versus and reducing demand, not versus. The more educated the populace becomes, the less religious the populace becomes, then the less political clout and social influence that religious ideas have. So the less political people are going to pander to those religious groups, because that's not where the power is, and that's not where the money is. And over time, that's gonna, that may correct itself somewhat. But I don't think it has to be an either or, and I think that either or verbiage is all too present among atheists, particularly atheist activists who are really vocal and really passionate about their views and how they feel things need to get done. It needs to be this way, and not necessarily. We can there are a bunch of different ways to add numbers together to get 4. It's not just 2 and 2.
Thanks, Todd. I think it's really interesting to me in particular to hear about places where, like France, where it's considered rude to talk about what religion you are, to even ask somebody about their religion. In America, I live in Canada, but I'm an American citizen, and I'm more familiar with politics there. You can't, at least at the highest levels of government, in a federal and even one step down, you can't be involved in politics and not say what you are. You can't. It's like literally it just wouldn't happen. If you do, the few people who have tried, and this isn't at the local level, but at the higher levels, the few people who have tried haven't been immediately discounted, and they're looked at suspiciously. Well, you must be a Muslim then if you don't want to talk about your religion, or you must be something horrible like an atheist. And of course, that's exactly the point. Like it's such an interesting thing for me to imagine a world in which politicians, where you wouldn't know what your politician's religion is. That's I can't, for even for me, who I think in a lot of ways that would be great. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm so familiar with, it's such an ingrained part of me where we know the religion of our politicians. It makes me uncomfortable to think of a world in which that wouldn't actually be the case. So I think that's a great example of why it's so hard to actually be truly secular. But that secularism, I think, comes into play. Like in Canada right now, we have in our federal election that just ended, the debate about the niqab came into play. It was very important in this election in terms of the opinion about whether somebody can wear a niqab when they are taking the oath of citizenship. And as a secularist, I did not understand that debate whatsoever. I didn't understand how it could even be a debate. I couldn't. I just, I'm just sitting here saying, okay, if we approach this as a secular person, I don't think there really is an issue. And so I assume automatically that if there's an issue, it's because people have an issue with Muslims, not an issue with what, something that is actually even related to the citizenship. And that's where the sort of anti-theism versus secularism, I actually, even as an atheist, start to get uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, if we've got anti-theism coming into play, this is what we're going to see? Trying to ban people from wearing certain religious clothes for no other reason except that we don't like it or we don't understand it, or, and so I think it is. But I think as from a secular perspective, when we're talking about just freedom of speech and expression, it becomes quite clear. And so it is interesting as well. This is a huge issue in France right now, the whole religious garb and the niqab and all of the veil and all of that. And that's, that's a huge political issue right now. And I feel like secularism has a voice in this to bring some reason to it, to bring some sense to this completely crazy issue that keeps going off the rails all over the place. And that's when I would like to see some articulate secularists step up and actually say what they're speaking for. Not necessarily, I'm an atheist, here I am, hear me roar. But, and Rita asked a good question in our sidebar, how? And I think, from her perspective, that is a super difficult thing. In America and Canada, it's pretty easy. We get involved, it's relatively easy. But I think maybe it has to start at a grassroots level, very, very small. You first got to get people to not be afraid of atheists, right? And so maybe some people who have experienced that in their countries, who experienced that transition, could speak to that. I actually wish we had some people from Scandinavian countries here, because I know that's a transition they've undergone relatively recently. Armin wanted to share some about Iran.
I think Philip wanted to respond to you. I'll go after him.
Okay, go ahead, Philippe.
A very short one. It was about what you said in the question of Marita. It's exemplarity, meaning that in countries like France, where it's very easy to be an atheist, I mean, it's the norm, or as you say, the northern countries, etc. We really have, because we still have the flame, we still have the light, to keep that light lit and to fight for it, and not to allow anyone to blow on it or to piss on it, and to be sure to keep what we have. Yeah, I know it stinks, but it's efficient to cut a fire. But we have to make it burn, and the more lighter that we have, and to accept all the refugees all we have now, and they all come in England or in France, and we have to make them safe and be sure that what happened to Charlie's can't happen again, and to be sure that to keep this, I know that what happened after Charlie was very impressive for the rest of the world, because basically all France was out saying, no, that's what we are. We want to keep this freedom, and you won't be allowed, or you won't be able to cut it out, and we are going to stay the way we are, pissing frogs. So now we have to keep that, not only for us, but to give a hope for the rest of the world, for the rest of atheists who are fighting and trying to survive, looking for shelter in the moral way or in the physical way. It's our duty to keep this light alive and this freedom intact. That's our task, and that's why I'm here. People always said, "What do you bother? You here? You're free here." But okay, I'm free here. But what about the others?
Thanks, Philippe. Really good points. Thank you. Armin, go ahead.
I just wanted to touch on the relationship between religion and politics in Islam, especially coming from my background. I was born in Iran. Most of my life I lived in Iran. What I say about Islam is based on my experience with Islam in Iran. It's not necessarily the same everywhere else, but also based on my study of history. You know, in Islam, religion and politics are not two separate entities, especially when Islam is in control. In fact, I didn't even know that they are separate for a very long time. When you have, based on my understanding, a good government is an Islamic. Based on my previous understanding before, a good. Let me just mute. Just make sure you mute yourself if you're not speaking. Make sure you mute. There, we're getting echo now. Yourself if you're not speaking. All right, can you mute yourself because I don't have access to your mic for some reason. There, fixed it. Okay, so where was I? Okay. Oh, it's back again. Can you mute yourself?
Costas, there we go. Armin, you were just saying that you never knew that the two things were separate. And
yes. So a good government is an Islamic government, and any time Islam is in power, obviously it had to be running, you know, the government. That's how it naturally supposed to be. And the best way of governing is the Islamic way. And politics and religion and politics as two separate entities was not necessarily the same. And then when I was introduced to the fact that these were in some places considered to be completely separate, and people were actually very passionate about keeping it separate, that was a very new concept to me and very interesting concept to me. I didn't even know this is when I was Muslim, and I didn't even know how that could be possible. Interesting thing is that even now a lot of Muslims in Western liberal Muslims or modern Muslims or whatever they call themselves these days, they try to say that actually no, Islam allows different. Islam is not a political religion. Islam is an individual. It's for each individual. Everybody can practice their religion in their own private space, and Islam respects everyone else's political views and decisions. And they try to make it more like what Christianity is today. And interestingly, in Christianity also wasn't like this before. But that is such for Muslims in the West, living in Western countries, to say that. A lot of Muslims in Islamic countries, for them, that's such a strange thing to say. And either they're purposefully deceiving other people, or they have no idea what they're talking about. This is not something that just fundamentalist Muslims say. This is what mainstream Muslims all over the world, other than this fringe group of new reformists in the West, mainstream Muslims, they all believe that if a government is in power, it has to be based on God's law. And that means it has to be Islamic, fully Islamic. It has to follow the Quran. That means all the rules within the country have to be Quranic. If you read the Bible, there's actually some good excuses for why maybe religion and politics and Christianity should be separate, because Jesus comes and says, like, oh, give to Caesar what is due. And some people are like, oh, look, Jesus is like, don't interfere with politics. Okay, but if you read the Quran and still think Islam is not a political religion, I don't know what you've read, because the entire thing, like the first half, which was revealed later during Muhammad's life, all the surahs that were Madani, is basically a guidance on how to run a society. And if you take the Quran at all seriously, you will know that this is a guide on how to govern a country or any society. In Iran, for example, everything is the whole idea of trying to getting religion and politics separate is ridiculous. Even suggesting that would give you a prison sentence. To suggest that, and there are some other countries like that too, which are Islamic. Not all of them are like that, but it's, people are like, oh, why can't you just be quiet about this? This is not, politics and religion are not the same. Well, guess what? Politics are, like Makisha said, this is such a Western thing to say. Where people come from in other places, like Iran or in Pakistan or in I don't know, even in Philippines, which is a Christian country, religion has such a strong influence in politics that it's so strong that if you ignore it, if you just think like atheist activists shouldn't shouldn't get involved in politics, because of the strong influence that it already have, you are actually helping religion get a stronger hold in politics. It's not like, it's not just about, it's not about making ourselves more influential in politics as atheists. It's about trying to get religion out of politics. That's what atheist activism is about. And in a lot of countries like Iran, it's ridiculous to think somebody could publicly go out and say, maybe, we need to, some of our laws should not, even the religious people, there are some of the laws that in Iran that are not based on Islam, they try to argue that it actually is. But for somebody to suggest that they shouldn't be, that's just basically political suicide and even literally suicide. When we fight for secularism and become active in politics, I don't do political activism. I do the bottom up approach. But I do understand that the atheist activists that do political activism, and a lot of these secular activists or atheist activists, when they are not fighting for special rights, they're fighting for equal rights. This is exactly what gay rights activists were saying. They were accused about, gay rights movements, they want special rights, and they don't. Yeah, okay. All they're trying to do when gay rights movements are getting into politics is not to get something beyond and above everybody else. They're just trying to become the same as everybody else, and that's what atheist activism is about. The word secularism, a lot of people think that secularism means using politics to limit the rights of religious people. Secularism means it doesn't mean anti-religious people. Secularism means that everybody has the same rights. Especially, this is true in Western countries, but it's also very true in a lot of Middle Eastern and countries next to the Middle Eastern countries, because of the bad experience they have had in Turkey and some religious people in Iran with Reza Shah and Ataturk, because they're introduced secularism as actually actively limiting the rights of religious people. So a lot of times in Turkey, for example, people consider, or in the entire Islamic world, people think secularism means that atheists will come rule the country and they tell you that you can't pray, you can't wear a hijab, you can't do this, and they use that. They use Ataturk or maybe some examples of that as this example of like, look, this is what happens when atheism it gets in control. But what we're trying to show as an example is maybe Canada or Denmark or Norway, to show that no, secularism means that everybody, including atheists, have to have the exact same rights as everybody else. Anyways, I'm out.
I really like that distinction, and I like the way you put it, Armin, where what we're really hoping to accomplish here is that religion, at least in terms of promoting specific religious dogmatism or theology, has no place in politics, has no place in running a country. I think one of the things we've been talking about in the sidebar in our chat is, how then does that happen? You know, in America we have lobbyists. I don't know how other countries' political systems work, but we have people who go to the politicians to essentially try to get their stuff through, get their perspective voiced, get their desires known, get their laws passed, things like that. And so, you know, I think it is just maybe a death by 1,000 cuts, where we just have to start chipping away, you know, especially in these places where it's so entrenched. It's challenging. It's a lot less challenging when I think about it as an American or a Canadian. You know, when I think about it from some of these other perspectives, it starts to feel really overwhelming. So again, I really appreciate hearing some of those other views. I know that Micah wanted to share a bit on the issue of the niqab and perhaps some other things. And then I know Marita wanted to go as well. Marita, does it make more sense for you to go to talk now before Micah, or does it matter? Doesn't matter. Okay, Micah, go ahead, and then we'll go to Marita.
Okay, great. Thanks, Makisha. I'm going to be really brief. First, in regards to the niqab.
Micah, your volume is really, really low for me. I'm not sure if that's the case for other people, but I'm not sure if you can maybe get closer to your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Just, yeah. So get as close to your mic as you can. That would be great.
I'm about 4 inches away from my computer screen, so.
we want to see inside your mouth, Micah.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. I'll turn my volume up, and I think we can get it from there. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Makisha. Just 2 points really quickly. In regards to what you mentioned about the niqab, I share with Armin the fact that I used to be a Muslim, and fortunately I've left the religion. And while even as I was toying with atheism, I would agree with you in the sense that from a secular perspective, it seems to be that this should not even be a matter of debate, that within the philosophies that we're enjoying over here, the individual should have the right to dress as they are. But on the flip side, and I know this sounds like a very far-right conservative position, but I would actually agree with Harper in this sense. To provide an extreme example, I don't think anybody could provide the oath for citizenship wearing a Nazi symbol. Again, it's a very extreme example, or displaying some other symbolic, displaying some sort of uniform or some sort of clothing which would indicate that they believe in something which stands in complete opposition to the beliefs espoused within Canada. So in regards to that, and this is not a suggestion, it's just a thought that I was having, is and I think this is similar to what Philippe also mentioned, would freedom of speech apply, or should it apply to all individuals across the board? I know this sounds elitist and selectionist, but if an individual's belief system and the first place mentions that, other belief systems are by default incorrect, that they do not stand on an equal footing with any other perspective that is being espoused in the present moment, should we give them the same rights? It's just an open question. Thanks. Hopefully you guys heard me.
Yes, your volume actually went up a little bit later on. I don't know if Armin tweaked something, but that was good. Thank you, Micah. And I think since we're coming upon the hour, it does sound like maybe we need to have another hangout about perspectives on freedom of speech. It's something that I know Armin has a really strong view on, and some ideas about how that really works out in society and politics and all of that. It's a conversation that comes up a lot, and one that always gets really good ideas and perspectives. And now that we have so many new team members, I think it would be great to bring that one up again. So we'll add that to the docket for another time. So Marita, I wanted to give you a chance to go, and then we'll get some last words in from anybody else who wants to. Just let me know in the sidebar, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
So we in Croatia have several pro-Catholic political parties, profit and non-profit associations. They don't do anything without permission from the church or without permission from the Bible. Yeah, the Bible. And political parties support the Catholic Church, that particular political parties, and church support them. Support them support them against LGBT community, against atheism, against secularity, against secular country, against our own constitution. And we have huge influence here by Catholic Church, by the Pope, the bishops, especially one bishop, and we don't see the way how we can be secular state with so big influence of Catholic Church. And people in the rural places are Catholics or some are atheists or communists or whatsoever. But the pro-Catholic parties, the nationalists, and even black shirt parties, especially one, they have huge influence on people. It's remarkable how much influence they have on people. Even people who are smart, who have a faculty or some bigger schools. And for rest of us, I see your comment, Makisha. So I'm laughing because we are both short hairs. Yeah. So I must laughing. Sorry. I really need secular state here. I really need that. And most of my Facebook friends and most of my keyboard warriors want that. But when we have some action, for example, we have protest a few weeks ago against the Vatican contracts, no one shows up. Everybody talk and write. But when we must do something, show something, nobody is there. Nobody. They attacked me because I tried to explain why is that bad. Why is that not good for us, for our country, for all the people? But no, they just know how to attack. Just attack, and they think that I'm stupid because I'm in Atheist Republic. They think I'm stupid because I wanna something what is impossible. They think the secularism in Croatia is impossible. Right now, in this moment. That's all.
Thank you, Marita. It's infuriating to and frustrating to hear these sorts of things, but I think it is also really so important. And again, I guess I have to just keep going back to we have to help people understand that that atheists don't eat babies and burn Christians and I don't know whatever else people think. There's such a fear at the individual level that we've got to capture individual hearts, I think, in some of these situations before we can even attempt to take on the government. It's if I can just get my neighbor not to look at me askance when I walk by thinking that I'm going to steal something because all atheists are criminals, that's a huge step in the right direction. That happens through relationships, that happens through developing friendships, and hopefully just getting people to see us for who we are. It is not as easy as I just made it sound. I certainly don't make that out to be a flippant comment. My comment before that kind of derailed Marita for a moment there was that the women here all have short hair, which is kind of unusual to see. So we have Allie, who has her luxurious locks of golden beauty or whatever. So apparently we need Allie back to represent the long-haired ladies. Okay, so before I get too off track, and since we're going over, which is okay because we had some last-minute folks join us, I believe oh my goodness, I've lost track. Somebody Costas, I believe, wanted to share, and since we haven't heard from him, we'll hear a few minutes from Costas, and then unless you have something really urgent, I think I might go to Arif, and then we'll have Casper close us out. We'll try to see if we can hear from Arif, and then Casper, and then we'll wrap up. All right, Costas, go ahead. Yes, you're good. You're good. Thanks, Costas. Thanks, Costas. That's really good. It's good. Again, good insight. And honestly, we were spending a lot of time talking about your accent while also trying to multitask and listen to what you were saying. So there, I don't think you missed any important questions in the sidebar there. You know, I don't know. I just think it is still so fascinating to me how many places conflate a person's atheism with some sort of bizarre or fringe political belief when, you know, really it's easier to conflate somebody's, like for example in America, it is actually statistically accurate to say that a Republican is probably a Christian. That's just a statistical reality. But to say an atheist is a communist, I'm pretty sure that's not statistically logical in any way. So, you know, it is that conflation, I think, is a really difficult thing to overcome, and it is some places much harder than others. You know, when Armin was talking, Todd and I were mentioning that in evangelical Christianity, there is a very similar merger of religion and politics. The idea that you can be a politician and not an evangelical Christian, it would have been completely foreign to me at the time. So I'm really, like, I would not have even been able to compute. It would have, like, I don't know, fried my neurons or something. So that is really similar, and it's certainly not to the degree. I don't think there's any way you can compare an evangelical American to a Muslim Iranian, but that, you know, that it is a. I understand to a degree where people are coming from when it just does not compute. It doesn't register, and that's the thing that has to be overcome when we're talking about a secularist government. I think, are we at Arif? Arif, I wanted to give you a chance to see if we can hear you. I know we're going way over. Hang with us, guys. If you're on YouTube, thanks for sticking around if you've been watching this whole thing. And Arif, go ahead. I'm so disappointed that we can't hear Arif. I don't know what's going on with his technology there. Fiddlesticks. Oh, that's a very sad face. Okay, so I'm gonna have to move on just because I don't think we're gonna get Arif now. Sorry. Oh, pouty lips. Okay, so everybody in the sidebar is very disappointed that we can't hear Arif. I really did want to get an update. This topic was originally suggested by him, so I'm really bummed that we can't get some input. But regardless of what we're talking about next week, Arif, hopefully you can join us and we'll get you to chime in on this topic. Doesn't matter what we're actually talking about. We're kind of all over the place anyway. One of the things I wanted to close out with before I pass it over to Casper is I do wonder, Armin mentioned at the very beginning that this is a bit of a hot button issue when you start talking about politics in atheist circles and atheists getting involved. And I do wonder if sometimes it's similar to Christianity, where when people come out with, like, if you were an evangelical and you voted Democrat, you would have been some sort of freak of nature. And I do wonder if it's a little bit like that in atheism, where there's a sort of assumption that atheists are a certain way, that atheists vote a certain way, that atheists have certain ideologies that are sort of monolithic, that atheism is this homogeneous, monolith where we all just follow in one moving thing throughout the world. And obviously is so far from reality, and as demonstrated here, we have people from all over the world. We have people from ideologies that come from all different places, and I think it might be a little threatening when atheists talk about being in politics, because all of a sudden we realize we don't always agree, and that can be scary. And how can we influence the world in favor of atheism if we don't always agree? And so I do think that, just from a human perspective, that's uncomfortable. It's discomforting to realize that somebody we agree with in so many important ways is so different from us politically. And politics is just like that. I think it just brings that out in people. But I think it's also really good, which is why I know I keep saying this, but I love that we have so many perspectives and that we can show so many different literal colors of atheism and positions and places where people are coming from. I think it's just so good, and as far as Atheist Republic, I think that's a huge thing we have to offer to the conversation. So please continue coming and speaking out and sharing those points of view. I'm going to toss it over to Casper, and then I'll close this out.
Okay, just real quick, I'm pretty sure that what Arif would have liked to talk about is there was yet another Bangladeshi blogger that was murdered recently. And I'm certain that what he would like to speak about is how the government there in Bangladesh is not protecting these people and making sure that this an end is brought to that. And I think that's a topic that we could give an entire discussion to. I'd love to have a Arif on for that. My closing point is actually just really short and very simple. Politics affects every single citizen of a nation, every single one, and so we have a duty to be involved. We have a responsibility to be involved because it affects everyone. So whether you're an atheist, whether you're religious, doesn't matter. You have a duty to get involved because it affects everyone. It affects all the citizens. And I think that's the most important point. That's what we have to look at. I know that you can disagree about how we go about it and how it's done and the tact that people take. But we need to understand that everyone needs to be involved so that everyone gets a fair shake. That's what equality is really about, making sure everyone gets a fair shake and everyone is involved. So that's the most important thing, and I think that's what we need to take away from this. Get involved, whether you want to be very vocal and outspoken about it or whether you think there's a more pluralistic way to go about it, that's fine. Go about it in your own way, but get involved. Don't say that it doesn't affect you, it doesn't matter, and that you shouldn't be involved. That's always wrong. That's always a bad position to take. So just get involved. Whether you're an activist or not, it matters. It matters to everyone. So that's about it. Just get involved. Do something. Make a difference.
Agreed. Well said, Casper. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks to all of the people who have spoken and said so many great things. We always say we've got a lot of sexy brains around here, so thanks for sharing your sexy brain with us today. And for those of you who are listening live, thanks for joining us. We have a handful every week who drop in and actually watch us live. And for those of you on YouTube, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us today and for toughing through the hour and 20 minutes we're coming upon here now. If you have any questions or comments, you can, as always, leave them below if you're listening on YouTube. You can email us. You can leave a comment on our website. Go to atheistrepublic.com. All of the ways to contact us or be involved are there. We love our volunteers. They are the lifeblood and what keeps Atheist Republic going. Please consider volunteering if that's something that you're excited about. There's all different kinds of ways to be involved. Check that out under volunteer. And if Atheist Republic is important to you, if it brings something of value to your life, please consider financially supporting us. There's lots of ways you can do that. Regular monthly contributions all the way down to $3, whatever you can afford, we will accept gratefully. And we appreciate, thanks to all of you who do financially support Atheist Republic. There is money required to keep this community going. And so if it brings value to your life, please consider doing that. Thanks everyone again. We hope to see you next week.